everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, my guests are Alice Woods, Executive Director, and Tim Zeiss, Director of Development and Marketing for Oceans Harbor House. For 32 years, Oceans Harbor House has addressed the needs of runaway and homeless youth. The organization provides services to young people facing trauma resulting from living in damaging home environments. Alice and Tim share their incredible journeys of how they both came to where they are today, personally and professionally. Alice grew up in Ocean City, New Jersey. She came to Oceans Harbor House in March of 2020 and has navigated through a lot of change and challenges due to the pandemic. She spent over 13 years in various roles in the United Way system in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. She journeyed her own road of addiction, trauma, and recovery in her earlier years. So her passion is helping young people build bright futures, and she can do that with a different lens and understanding due to all that she herself has been through. Listen in to hear about the importance of the North Star and what the word strength really means to her. Also, side note, Alice turns the tables on me and asks me the last question that I ask all of my guests. Tim grew up in Union County, New Jersey. Tim joined Oceans Harbor House in January 2021. He previously served as Executive Director, Foundation and Alumni Affairs at Brookdale Community College for 20 years. Listen in to hear Tim share how your vibe attracts your tribe and what he says about the importance of just showing up. Please subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Stream this podcast on all streaming sites. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. I am also the CEO and co-founder of the Zach G. Applaudor Kids Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that is making a difference in the lives of children who are living with financial barriers that are looking for an ongoing creative connection. Please visit applaudorkids.org for more information. And for more information about this podcast and my consulting services, visit todayisthedayliveit.com. Have a great week, everyone. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and I am always, every week I say this, I'm so thrilled to sit in a Zoom room, actually, with some incredible changemakers who are making a difference in the communities that they serve. And today I have with me Alice Woods and Tim Zeiss. Hi, both of you. How are you doing today?
Great, Jody. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to have you. So I'm going to now do the part that I always say and let everybody know I'm going to read. And then we're going to get into a fabulous conversation to learn more about you and Oceans Harbor House. So Alice Woods is the Executive Director to Oceans Harbor House and has been since March 2020. She's navigated through a very tough year, a challenging year through the pandemic. She began her career in a residential program to harbor women and children who were victims of domestic violence. She then joined the United Way of Atlantic County to launch an early childhood program. She spent over 13 years in various roles in the United Way system in New Jersey and PA, but before serving youth in a higher education setting and then serving seniors in a grassroots agency. Having journeyed her own road of addiction, trauma, and recovery in her earlier years, her passion is serving young people and helping them build bright futures. Alice works closely with members of the staff and board at Oceans Harbor House and for the needs of the youth to be met both now and for years to come. She is a single parent to a teenager named EJ. So welcome, Alice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Oh, absolutely. And then we're going to move on to Tim. Tim joined Oceans Harbor House in January of 2021. So you're a newer member to the team, I see, Tim.
Yes.
And you previously served as Executive Director, Foundation and Alumni Affairs at Brookdale Community College for 20 years, responsible for overseeing the Brookdale Community College Foundation and the Brookdale Community College Alumni Association. Prior to that, he served as Corporate Communication Director for New Jersey Press, Inc., the parent company to the Asbury Park Press. He has built an extensive network throughout Monmouth and Ocean counties based on his professional experience and volunteer activities. Tim is responsible for raising funds to support the organization's missions, creating greater awareness of the agency's broad menu of programs and services, serving youth, and forging collaborations with organizations and individuals who share the vision of the collective impact. And Tim is married and has an adult daughter who is a social worker. So again, welcome to Today's the Day Changemakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So, and you both have incredible backgrounds. And I always like to start almost a little bit from the beginning so that our listeners kind of know where you came from, where you grew up, what kind of a child you were. You know, we find that a lot of the shyer kids are the ones who are out there right now, standing at the podiums and really being the outgoing people who are bringing people together, the collaborators. I can raise my hand to say that I'm one of those shyer kids who is now doing something like that. So let's start with you, Alice. Where did you grow up? Give us a little bit of background about you, when you were younger and what kind of a child you were.
I said to Tim, does she really want to know that answer? Yeah,
do.
so I grew up in Ocean City, down in Cape May County. Grew up there, lived there all my life. It's a shore town, ocean town, beach town. So, that's my way of life. We grew up on the beach, we grew up on the water, we grew up, being outside and in the summers. And I moved back there a few years ago so that my teenager could go to the same high school as I did. So, but my childhood was difficult. I had parents that, struggled in their own issues, one with alcoholism and the other with codependency and other issues. So it was a tumultuous time. So I really feel like my sister and I, she's older, we struggled. We struggled to find our own way. We struggled to find out, what role we played in that family, how we could kind of be ourselves and not be, swept away by the drama that happened in the house. So it really, it defined us for a long time. I don't think it defines me personally in a negative way anymore. I usually try to think of those things as the strength that I draw on, that we went through that and that I can help other people that are growing up with that or grew up with that kind of situation.
Absolutely. You have strength above your head that I see right there. And you use
That's
that.
correct. Yes. I have this word I have this word in my house, in my office, everywhere. So, because I have to remember, I've tapped into a lot of, there's been a lot of issues over the years through all of that in my own recovery. I am a recovering alcoholic too. So, I've tapped into a lot of my own strength throughout the time. So I really try to remember that whenever things come up.
No,
Yeah.
and thank you. And thank you for sharing that, because I feel that, obviously in the work that you're doing, and we'll get to Oceans Harbor House and talk about the kids and what many of them have been through, you can relate, I'm assuming, to a lot of what you see. So what an extraordinary position you are in, to be able to give back and support those who, you might, in some cases, you might even be looking a little bit in the mirror, which I'm sure is not.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I was going to say that was one of the reasons why I was really drawn to this particular position, is because, I think that for me growing up, you asked about how I was as a child. I would have loved to have had some more positive female role models. We didn't see that growing up. So, if I can be that in any way, or share my story with any of the kids, that you can overcome some of that stuff, that's really what enticed me about being here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you feel that, were you more an introvert or an extrovert growing up in that environment?
Jody, I'm really an introvert. It doesn't seem like that because I have a big personality and I talk to people all the time, but I'm actually very shy. Yeah. And I was growing up. I could hardly even look at people when I was growing up. So I've come a long way with that. Yeah.
I totally can relate to that 100%. I always was like, please, we know when they would say, okay, who wants to in the classroom? And you want to hide under the desk.
That's right. That was me.
Same here. So I could totally relate. Yet, like I said earlier, it always seems to be those who are now, running organizations that were the shyer people when they were younger, shyer kids.
That's right. That's right.
Tim, let's turn this over to you now and talk a little bit about your childhood and the type of child you were and where you grew up.
Well, I grew up primarily in Union County in New Jersey. My father was a fireman. My mother was one of the first women to go into public relations. So I was the youngest of four, 13-year difference. And I grew up in a very stable family, and it was kind of an unusual at the time that my mother was the white-collar professional, my father was the fireman who worked shifts. So, there were days I come home from school and my father would be cleaning the house or making dinner. So they were way ahead of their time, and they were both active in volunteering in the community. And so, I really was I an introvert? Absolutely. People go through family albums and they're saying, how come there are no pictures of Tim? It's just, I never wanted to be in photos and never wanted to be in the camera. So I kind of lived in my own little imaginary world there for a long time as a kid.
Really? Yeah. So you were an introvert too, and now look what you're doing, right? It's
right.
How we truly do change. So Tim, what did you think you were going to become when you grew up? With a strong mom, right? And a dad who really sounds like they set a great stage for you.
I wasn't really sure. I thought at one point I wanted to be a writer, but I soon found out that I didn't have the discipline to actually write an entire book. It's still on my list to check off. So I went to a Jesuit university, and initially I majored in English, and I had a minor in philosophy. And I realized that getting a job with those kinds of majors probably wasn't going to work. So there was a brand new field called communications. And I realized I did like to write, and I actually did like to speak. So I graduated with a degree in communications, and that just kind of launched me into a career in public relations prior to getting into the fundraising world.
So in a way, followed mom's footsteps a little bit, right?
Yeah, there were quite a few writers in our family. I had cousins who were newspaper reporters. So I guess it's in the genes. The one thing I realized, yeah, I did want to be a musician when I was a kid, and I realized I had absolutely no talent in that regard.
I understand that. That happens in my family too. We've got, my dad was the opera singer of my kids and my niece, and then it skipped a generation in between. So I totally get it. But,
So you can identify.
yes, without a doubt. Alice, let me ask you the same question. So what did you think, again, in your situation, very uniquely different. It's not like you had those role models that were, potentially helping you with who you wanted to be when you grew up. But what did you think of?
Well, it's interesting. I've always had this sort of left brain, right brain kind of conflict for myself, because I am a creative person. And I always wanted to be an interior designer, because I really love, that you would be able to come home to a space that was peaceful and beautiful. And, but like Tim said about imaginary life, I used to watch the show Star Trek, and I used to imagine myself commanding a starship. So I always thought I needed to like run something. And I don't know whether that was because I didn't feel like I had any control in the family or whatever. But I always thought that I would be some kind of a leader. But I try to balance that with the artistic kind of stuff. I too wanted to go into music, but never really had the discipline or the talent to do that. So yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, you are commanding a ship now. It's just
I am.
that's
Yes.
for sure. That's awesome. So
Sometimes in uncharted territory too.
True. Yes, a new frontier. Yeah.
Actually this year, right? That's
Yes.
for sure. So when you did get your first job, Alice, what type of job did you have?
Well, I worked in the restaurant, food and beverage business for many years, and I'm a late bloomer. So I didn't go to college right after high school because I was in my active addiction then. And that really kind of took precedence over everything. So I was just working in restaurants and banquets. And later I did event planning and things like that. So it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that I started to go back to school, and then I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. And when I came out of that, I knew I wanted to help people, and I wanted to help children because of what, we had gone through as children. So I started volunteering and things like that. And I volunteered at the domestic violence shelter. So that's really how I got, and then I got hired there. So that's really my first job in this kind of field. But up to that point, I had done restaurant and food and beverage things all the way. So, yeah.
I think it's such a great message to share of, where you were to where you led yourself, right? Very, very different. And what would you say if somebody's listening and is dealing with a lot of the things that you're talking about? How did you get yourself to launch yourself from being in that industry to then moving yourself to going back to school to go and then to do what you really were put here to do? It sounds like it goes back to running the ship, right? So
yeah. Well, I am fortunate that I encountered people on my journey that were role models and that were willing to spend time mentoring and helping. And I, luckily, I was always a person who said, I need help, and people came along and tried to do that, So I would say that, for people that are struggling, when you ask for help, it sometimes feels like a weakness, but it also brings the most incredible people in your path that it just changes everything, And then I also, and I was just telling our team this, I kind of live by like a North Star or a vision, and I didn't want that for my life. I was a cocktail server for a long time, and I thought, I don't want to be, not that that's a bad thing, but for me, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 60 years old. I need to make a difference, and I better get started to figure out what that is. So I kind of always live by what the vision is for my life, and then kind of work backwards from that.
Yeah. If like you were saying just a second ago, if your vision is that you want to be a cocktail waitress or anything
Yes.
you want to be, as long as that's in your heart and that's what you want, you want to be able to look back on your life and say, that's perfect. It just has to be about what your purpose is. And then when we find what our purpose is, it's so important to search it out and create it. I do want to go back to something you said, which I think is really important. When you talk about, I need help, and then people feeling that that's a weakness. When you went to somebody, and I think this is important for anybody who may be listening, who may want some help, how did you approach the I need help with that person? Did you just come right out and say it? Or did you, what was your way of getting that help?
Well, I think a couple of different ways. There were a couple of times when people saw how off the track I was and said, I want to help you. Can I help you? And I was like, yeah. So sometimes it's just answering, someone's kindness. But then there were other times in my life where I would think I would come across someone and I would think, I think that person can probably help me. And I would just be honest and say, this is my situation, and I really, need some help and guidance. And that's kind of what I would do. And then they'd say, okay, great, sure.
I think people are inherently kind if you ask for help.
Absolutely.
And without taking advantage, but just asking from that kind of place. I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Tim, so where did you start your career? Where did you launch from?
My first job out of college was as public information officer for the American Cancer Society. So it was obviously publicizing the work done by the organization. I was also in charge of volunteer recruitment and training to have folks go out and speak in the community about the 7 warning signs of cancer, and that was very rewarding. But then I took a break. One dream I did have was I wanted to see the country. I hadn't really done much traveling as a kid. So while I was working that full-time job, I had a part-time job at night cleaning a factory. I saved all that money. And a friend and I were going to travel around the country for a year in my van. So I gave notice of my job. I gave up my apartment. And 3 weeks before we're supposed to leave, my friend said, I'm not going to go. So I said, well, I am. So I spent almost a year in 1980 traveling around the country, just going zigzag, just experiencing different things. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Then when I came back, I said, well, now I have to get a job and I have to find a place to live. And I wound up working in Trenton with a lobbyist for 3 years, funded by the Dodge Foundation. Then I wound up working in New York at an international PR agency called Manning, Selvage and Lee. And just through circumstance, I wound up being the person responsible for Steinway & Sons piano account, AT&T Consumer Products Division, and then for the Parade of Tall Ships in 1986.
Oh my goodness.
So I've had, and I have to be honest, none of this was planned. It was all random. When I worked at the agency in New York, I had just bought an old sailboat and was teaching myself to sail. And the president of the agency had a meeting with all of us saying, we want to land the operations sail Parade of Tall Ships account. Who here knows anything about sailing? And my boss raised his hand and said, Tim knows all about it. And I was like, what? I didn't know. I was just learning. And that's how I got that assignment, doing all the media relations and coordination for that. So I wound up leaving New York because my daughter was young and I was tired of commuting. And I wound up being the corporate communications director for the parent company of the Asbury Park Press for 10 years. I was then downsized in 1997 and then, had a house, had a daughter, was married at the time. Like, what do I do? I just went around and met with all my contacts in the community, and I wound up actually working at the community YMCA as vice president of fundraising and marketing for a year and a half, and then I wound up at Brookdale. So it's been random. None of it was planned.
Well, and not to mention the fact that I had to see that I learned something new about everybody on this podcast. It's amazing. So we both worked for the community YMCA, just at two very different times. I didn't know that, which is very funny. And
When were you there?
I'm development director.
When?
Oh goodness, 2018.
Oh,
Yeah, 2017, 2018. Yeah, somewhere around that. So isn't that funny? And I swear I learn all these things just when we're recording. It's very
Sure.
I was there from 1998 to 2000, beginning of
yes. So we definitely missed each other by several years, but we were almost in the same similar positions. So that's fine. And then I have to go back, of course, to the traveling around the country all by yourself. I mean, of course. But you see, I read your bios, and none of the things that you just shared are in there, but they're so incredible to know about. Because we all bring so much. I was telling somebody today, we are all originals. There's no duplicates of us. So we all are truly originals and have such great stories to share. So Tim, if you could, I'd love to know, is there one or two things that stand out that you learned from that journey? I think it'd be so incredible to hear.
Well, what was interesting, I was kind of down on New Jersey at the time. It was sort of like, I want to see other parts of the country. And I was convinced that I was not meant to be in New Jersey. And once I reached California, I kind of felt like, wow, I'm home. This is where I belong. But I wound up coming back because I was dating someone at the time. And what I learned was, it doesn't matter where you go. It's an inside job, right? You can be happy wherever you are. And I had family here, friends, and I also realized that we were very lucky in New Jersey, the diversity that we had, diversity of people, diversity of culture, diversity of having New York and Philadelphia so close, the mountains close, the beach close. I'm a beach lover. I have to be near the water. So what I learned was that, maybe I was a little unsettled at the time. I was I wanted to see that. And plus, just to revert, when I was 17, I had the opportunity randomly to go to Ireland and England with a classmate that I didn't even know in high school. He's put a little index card on the bulletin board and said, have relatives in Ireland and England looking for travel mate for 2 weeks. So I called him up and said, what's the deal? He said, all you need is plane fare and pocket money. I went to my parents. They said, absolutely no. I worked on them. I said, listen, I have a part-time job. I have money. Long story short, we were supposed to be gone for 2 weeks in Ireland and England. We found out we were in England. We could fly free on Aer Lingus to Amsterdam round trip. So we wound up going there and then backpacking through Amsterdam, Luxembourg, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Germany. I was gone almost the entire summer, much to the chagrin of my parents, but it was a life-changing experience as well.
Wow, Tim, that's incredible. Very well traveled, that's for sure. What a great stories.
Well, prior to that, I had never been out of New Jersey. So that was my first plane ride too.
Wow, incredible. Oh my gosh. That I'm sure any teenager hearing that would love the opportunity to be able to do something like that. That's an incredible. I want to do that. Never mind. I don't want to be. It sounds like so much fun. So I want to go into the work of Oceans Harbor House and really hear, so that our listeners can hear more about that. And it's incredible because as you share what Oceans Harbor House does, you can see, you'll be able to, just from hearing from both of your backgrounds, how the connection and how you're there really makes such great sense for both of you. So Alice, I'm going to have you start and talk about the programs and Oceans Harbor House.
So Oceans Harbor House has been in existence since the late 80s. A group of community-minded citizens in the late 80s came together and saw that there was, a very significant youth homeless problem. So they got together and formed the 501c3, and that became the Emergency Youth Shelter. And that was our only program for many years. But after, that program serves ages 10 to 19, so a wider range of kids, and sometimes they're younger. But we also saw the need to serve older kids. So over the years, the board got together and decided that we needed a residential program that would handle older kids, and they could stay a longer time because the shelter is only a 30-day program. So we opened up what's called the Supervised Transitional Living Program. And that's a house. There's two houses. So one is the shelter and one is the what we call TLP, or the Transitional Living Program. And there's 12 beds in each of those programs. The one at the Transitional Living Program that I just described is for older kids from 16 to 21. So, and they can stay 18 months, and they get a lot more programming. They get, life skills, job connections, educational connections, things like that. So, and then a few years ago, we got the contract from Ocean County to do family crisis intervention. So these are families in crisis. We work with the youth and their families. We do counseling, we do family engagement activities. And we also got the contract to do the electronic monitoring piece, which is ankle bracelets for court-ordered youth. So we put the bracelets on, we monitor those bracelets. We also do counseling and to, avert further court, involvement. We also recently have been doing a lot more with human trafficking. We were just awarded a fellowship from the My Life, My Choice, which is the curriculum for human trafficking prevention. So we're doing a lot more of that. We do a lot of out-client groups that kids can come to, families can come to throughout the year. They're monthly, they're regular, they're weekly. So that's probably the overview of all the programs of the agency.
It's an incredible space. I have toured your facility. We've actually, through the Zach G. Uploader Kids Foundation, we funded one of your,
Oh, right.
a couple of years ago to take vocal lessons. And so, I think that the work you do is totally incredible. Knowing you're there now, what, over a year?
Yes, a year now.
What would you say the most rewarding experience to date would be that you could share with us? Something you could share with us, because I know everything is very confidential.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, it was a difficult, as you said, I started March 23rd, 2020. So 2 days after the governor signed the executive order for stay at home and all that. So I walked in the front door and they gave me a list of things to do, and including, come up with a COVID response plan. So it was like, okay. And everything was different because, I'm a development person like you were and Tim is. And, I was thinking I was just going to come meet people and start, shaking hands and going to lunch and, raising money. But we had a lot of other internal things to do. So we really looked at every process in the agency, which I think agencies don't actually get the opportunity to do like we did. Because we were, we had to, we really couldn't get out there and do things. But what I learned is that, our staff and our kids, multiple kids had COVID, staff had COVID, but the resiliency of our staff and the kids that live here, I learned that, really, you don't want to have to adapt to things, but they adapted so well to that. And I think it just made everyone really look at how we could be stronger as people and as an agency. So I think probably that was the most rewarding thing, to be able to really dig deep inside yourself, inside your agency, and look at your willingness to be adaptable, because we needed people to come from one program to another. And one program had sick people and one program did not have sick people. So it was like, do I really want to work over there when there's sickness? And some people said no. And some people had to exit the agency. And some people said, yes, I'm willing to step up. And no matter whether I'm at risk or not, I'm part of this team. So I think it really just forced everybody to be super introspective about what they were willing to step up to do. And we've seen people really rise to the level of leadership and caring. And it just helped us to set boundaries. So I think that's really probably the one thing that I would say was really poignant about this year.
Tim, and I know, for getting funding this year, it was a tough year for most, although some did very, very well, especially frontline organizations. How did you tell your story a little bit differently? And also, just to clarify too, I know for you to tell your story, it's very uniquely different because of the confidentiality. It's not like you could say, here's John, and this is John's story. So can you give us a little bit about how you're able to do that and how you were able to continue to receive funding?
Well, again, my background is communications. So the fact that I'm in charge of development and marketing, my efforts, whether it's through social media, through the newsletter we send out, through any of the collateral materials we send out for our events, it is telling a story. And sometimes we have the privilege of sharing an individual story. And one recent one, and she's profiled in our brochure, was someone who kind of floundered, was in and out of the program. And long story short, she graduated with her bachelor's in social work from Georgian Court, and she plans to go on to get her master's in social work. And she completely credits the organization for turning her life around. And, again, I'm the newcomer here, so I don't know all the stories of past residents. We have a young man who's in the Air Force now. He reached out just in the beginning of the year. And it was funny. It was like conversational. Hey, I don't know if the people that work there are still there. I just want to let them know I'm now married. I have a dog, and I'm in the Air Force, right? And so we have the stories to tell. And what we're doing now is focusing more on outcomes. It's not just about the services we provide, but how many folks we're serving and what we're doing for them and how we are making a positive impact on their lives. So I love it. I kind of describe it. People said to me, you were at Brookdale for 20 years and, why'd you leave? I said, well, I wanted to do something more grassroots. I'm very proud of the work that we did at Brookdale Community College Foundation, raising money for scholarships and grants. But I find this terribly rewarding. And what attracted me, I think, in my nonprofit career was, again, my influence my parents had on me as being a volunteer. When my daughter was young, I coached her in soccer, I coached her in basketball, and I coached her in softball. And I just love working with kids. And the reason I loved coaching was, one, I wanted them to learn the sport they were playing. I wanted them to have fun, and I wanted to build their confidence. Because if you build someone's confidence, they have fun and they're willing to take risks. I used to take girls that, were playing midfield in soccer and say, go play goalie today. And they're like, Mr. Zeiss, I've never played goalie before. It's like, you'll do fine. And then they would do fine. And then that just built their confidence. So I said to Alice, I'm in the waning years of my career and I wanted to do more grassroots. And I find this, in the 6 months, or I guess it's now 7 months that I've been here, I'm finding the work very rewarding.
That's amazing and incredible. And you just said something that's really important. You just need somebody to believe in you, whether you're in a situation of playing a game or in the situation of the work you do each and every day. Somebody to just tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's going to be okay or you got this can be changing.
Absolutely.
Alice, can you share, how do the kids get to you, right? In either of the programs, how do they find you?
Well, mostly through referrals from schools, but also a young person can come to us on their own accord, having heard of us, about us in various ways, or through a friend, or parents do call. And when situations are bad enough at home, they do call to try and figure out what can be an option. But mostly it's referrals. And the biggest referral source is definitely schools. But it's also law enforcement. It's also other agencies, that the kid has touched, including the state, but others too. There's multiple touch points where people can come in. But yeah, the large part is referrals. But one of the things that we were really concerned about with last year was because it is so heavily referred by the schools, the schools really weren't meeting and kids were, they didn't have their same social supports and those touch points with the people that know the programs. So we really tried to find new ways to reach them, on the streets and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And Jody, there's a couple of misconceptions that I found that people have about the work that we do. One, they think these are bad kids. And I said, no, they're not bad kids. Right. They're kids in bad situations, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be someone similar to, Alice's experience as a young woman, right? They're in a dysfunctional home. And we don't just serve Ocean County. We serve Monmouth County. We actually have had kids living with us from outside the region. So, that's an important part of the story we're trying to tell. We're based in Toms River, but we're open to kids from anywhere.
Yeah, I know that's important, and I'm glad you shared that, Tim, because I think a lot of people might just think Ocean's Harbor House, so Ocean County, and in that realm. So that's good. Thank you.
Jody, could we just pause for 1 second when you edit? because
Yeah.
someone's ringing our doorbell. I don't know. It's just the two of us here.
I'll go get it.
Okay. I don't know how that affects your recording. I just didn't want it to keep ringing.
No. I'm just going to make a note.
Okay.
We'll edit.
Because I could hear it came ringing. It's like,
So yeah, somebody's.
how's it going so far?
Yeah, you feeling good about this?
Yeah. Good.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we'll get to a couple more things.
Actually, they're no longer there. Oh,
Oh, okay. All right, good.
No problem. We'll make that edit. That's easy. So we're gonna go back and we'll let's see. We ended that conversation and now I just want to get back to. So you have 24 beds. It sounds like 12 in each program. During the pandemic, were they completely filled in both programs?
They were not. And the transitional living program was mostly full, but the state of New Jersey stopped us from receiving new folks because of the COVID, all the guidelines and things like that. So we couldn't take new intakes for a number of months. The shelter situation is a little bit more complicated. We were not full there, but the shelter is funded by state and federal funds, and both those funding sources have stipulations attached to them, which actually we're finding has made it harder for us to fill those beds, if you can imagine that. So we're really trying to really look at how we can, sort of not, and we also lost state funding last fall when the budget crisis for New Jersey, they had to cut some programs because their budget was what it was because of all the money that was spent and not coming in from the federal government. So but uniquely, in a kind of double-edged sword, we lost money for 6 of our beds, but now they're unfunded. And that also means that there are no stipulations for those beds. So we can serve people that we might not have served before in terms of respite, in terms of, potentially juvenile justice people. So it's actually an opportunity to really build back on that. But the need is still there. We know that for sure. The need is more than ever. But because of all the guidelines and things that were happening, we actually saw a downturn in those that came to the programs.
Is it still like that right now?
It's now we're getting back into normal times. Now people are really starting to come back, and the state lifted those bans. And we've been counseling people through our other programs in an increased way. And now we're starting to really look at how to fill those beds again. Yeah.
I have to say, when I took the tour of the facility, I was blown away by, first of all, the cleanliness and the beauty. It was just absolutely beautiful. But also, I believe correct me if I'm wrong, there's like a chore chart.
Yes.
Like everybody that lives there. And so talk a little bit about living when you're living as part of that group, what that's like for the kids.
Yes. I mean, we hate to call it a program because it's their home, but it is a program too. And the program is about, there's guidelines, there's rules that have to be followed in each of the homes. There's curfews, there's, chores that have to be done by every single person that lives there. There's responsibilities, and the staff is, charged with kind of making sure everyone does that, and what happens when they don't. But they have, there's some democracy in some of that, and some of that is kind of just, what the rules of the house are. But we want them to feel ownership of their home space, and that they have an investment in it. So I think when you're preparing meals, they prepare meals. We recently got a grant from Provident Bank to increase our like the meal preparations and learning about how to make healthy meals and just all that kind of stuff, just so they have those skills. I think the more that they do that, then the more autonomous that they could become going forward. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a fabulous grant that you were able to get from Providence.
That's great. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Tim, what kind of upcoming, I know that our events were, pretty much either if they were in person, many times they either were canceled or went virtual, but what do you have coming up now, and are they virtual or in person?
So our next event is called the 25th Anniversary Oceans Harbor House Ride for New Beginnings. In its infancy, this was an event where cyclists rode for 5 days, right? Hundreds of miles to raise money. what we're doing this year is it's a in-person hybrid virtual. You can participate in the group rides. You could ride the bike in your neighborhood. You could ride your bike in your basement. You could climb on your Peloton. And it's all designed for the participants to get sponsors to support their effort. We have different formats, 400 miles, 200 miles, 63 miles. So you can pick and choose what works best for you. And we will have the celebratory ride and event on September 25th at Loretta Winery. And everyone who participated, the sponsors, we're seeking corporate sponsors, which is we're working on now. And all the participants who rode in the event or helped support the event will be invited. So we're looking forward to that. And then we also have a walk scheduled for November 13th, which is National Youth Homeless Prevention Month. And we're working on the details for that now. And we just concluded our art auction, which featured the art created by our youth and some local artists. We did that at the Ocean County Artists Guild in Island Heights. We had more than 115 people respond to come. Everyone had a great time. So we're moving forward with our events. We're trying to be creative, realizing the environment's a little unsettled, and giving people options of how to support them.
And Tim and I both are featuring art by our youth and our backgrounds here. Yes. Speaking of the art, yeah. So the art there, yeah, right behind us. Art therapy is something that we really believe in for our kids here. It's really great for them to be able to express themselves that way. And the island, the Ocean County Artists Guild that Tim mentioned, they donate some of their time to do art therapy with our kids. But we had beautiful pieces that have come out of that. We had a whole social justice wall at the art auction of just the way that people are expressing all that's happening in our world right now. So it's really great for our kids to be able to do that. So, but I just want to say we have our pieces right behind us.
I love that. And it's so true. You know, it is such a creative outlet is just such a stress reliever. It puts them in their flow. It just creates them, like you were talking about, Tim, before, about being in your own world a little bit. I feel like it does that as well for for them, and it's a comfort. So I love that. And it's funny because my eyes kept going, Alice, to he's there. And of course I love the ocean. And so every time Tim pops up, I'm looking at that. So I didn't know if you guys actually created those or they came with
our kids did that. Yeah.
So I love that. That's awesome. Tim, I just want to go back. So if somebody is looking to donate, whether it's financial or otherwise, what other things are you looking for, and where can they go to find out more information about Oceans Harbor House?
Well, we're always looking for volunteers to help with our events or to help with some of our maintenance issues. You know, we have a facilities director who can always use help with sprucing up the grounds, painting projects, a whole variety of things. We also have a wish list of items that the kids can use. So we publish that on our website. So if people go to oceansharborhouse.org, they'll see all the various ways that they can participate. So whether it's as a volunteer, as a donor, someone wants to volunteer for a day project. We actually had we have people. In fact, just today, there's a local church group that every month brings like cleaning products and toilet tissue and paper towels. And we have many organizations that do that. And obviously that saves us money. We don't have to spend the money on those kinds of things. So those in-kind contributions make a tremendous difference as well. So if people go to our website, and we're in the process of totally revamping the website to tell our story. And part of that is, and I know Alice is a big proponent of this, you know, we want to tell, we don't want to seem doom and gloom, right? You know, we want to show, bright stories, bright futures. So any of the collateral materials we're developing now, the website will reflect that. Not that the work that we're doing isn't serious, but we want to show people there are paths forward. And the work that we're doing through our counselors working with the kids is making a huge impact.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to make sure we said that before we ended, that, we sort of had a sort of older look, kids in dark hoodies and, which we're not saying that doesn't exist. Of course, the homelessness piece is a serious matter. And when kids come to us in crisis, the reasons that they come to us, come here about is they're heartbreaking issues. But we wanted to show that it isn't, and it's not for us, not just a night. It's about a future. It's about, what else are we doing for that young person to help make their life a success long term. So like I said before, connecting to a job or connecting to education, or, helping them learn how to cook for themselves or make choices for themselves. One of our programs is very big on helping them set personal goals and then milestones to that. So our tagline is Save Today, Empower Tomorrow. So it's about, this point, yes, we want to help them at this particular point, but we also want to help them get to that future that Tim talked about.
Now that, I think that's very important. And the updates are always good. It's always nice because then you can push that out and you get, people who might have looked a while back again to look and see what's going on and what's new. Tim, just another question about social media, because I think it's important. Can you be found on any social media on Facebook or Instagram?
Yes, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Okay, yeah. So easy to find. So just a few more questions. And one of the things I really wanted to ask is that I've been talking a lot about the fact that in the nonprofit sector, we're the only sector that is talked about as what we're not. And it's really our IRS designation.
Right.
So Simon Sinek, I don't know if either one of you have ever listened to him,
Yes.
but he talks about nonprofits being called for impact organizations. And I am on a mission. This is something that that's very close to me, because I feel like people view nonprofits, they always think you're coming, right? You're coming for money and not talk about your impact. And that is so about what we are about. So I always like to ask my nonprofit guests, what are your thoughts on that? Either one of you.
So there's a guy named Dan Pallotta, and you probably heard his talks too as well. He would speak about the salaries of nonprofit people and how, the sector kind of thinks we should be having these low salaries and things like that because, but we're doing a lot of different jobs. Some of us are wearing many hats, So I often think the salaries are not quite enough. But it isn't about the salaries, right? It isn't about the donations. It's about the meaningful work. You're right. It's about the impact we're making, the changed lives. In what other place do you see that you came in with this and now the issue is so much, improved? I think we don't speak about that enough. The word nonprofits just seems to be negative.
Yeah, You're right. I feel that same way, Tim.
I totally agree. One of the terms I like to use is collective impact. And one of my missions has been, since I've been here, is connecting us with other youth serving organizations, for us to learn more about what they do, for them to learn more about what we do, to see if there's ways that we can collaborate and continuing to serve the community. Yeah, definitely for impact. And there's been this also bias, I think, among grant funding organizations or private foundations, that they don't want to support general operating support.
Yes.
That's starting to change because they're realizing, especially the type of work that this organization does, you need boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's not people sitting in some office somewhere. You have to have counselors. You have to have people manning the 24-hour facilities. If you don't have those folks, you can't run those facilities. So for impact. And I think the nonprofit world collectively needs to do a better job in marketing that we are for impact. And we wouldn't exist if someone else was doing it. Right?
You're right. You're 100% right. So so thank you for weighing in.
We're all on the same page on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most are. And I feel like, it's funny because sometimes then even on my podcast, people start changing when we start saying the word nonprofit. They'll be like, no, for impact organization.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if we start doing,
we all did that. Yes. Yeah.
we can change the dynamic. Alice, I did want to ask you something. You had a minor in women's studies. You've talked about having mentors along the way to help you to get to where you are today with having a more challenging, home life. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think that women could be doing better if you think there are things we could be doing better to continue to lift each other up as some of us climb up the ladder or just need support?
Well, I think that, we've come a long way, but we still have a very long way to go. I don't know what the stats are. I think it's maybe depending on the report, it's between 2 and 6% of Fortune 500 companies are CEO'd by women. So that's still not very much. So we have a long way to go. I think, we need to not, we need to be unified, right? So if there's a woman in charge, of course, taking opinions from all sources, but when the leader of the organization, and I don't mean to sound dictatorial, but when the leader of the organization is a woman and makes a decision and has, gotten information from all sources and made an informed decision, then we need to support that. And we need to not be in the background saying why that. So I think sometimes women can be their own worst enemies by gossiping or, something like that. I also think that, as women, we really need to feel that we have that true north. So what's that vision for our agencies or our lives? And then trust that the steps we lay out will get us there. Because I think the tendency for us as women is to feel like, well, I have to listen to this or I have to compromise here. No, I mean, we don't. If we have that vision and it's really straightforward and we really understand what we're trying to get to, we trust ourselves and we follow the path to get there. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, and it is about supporting each other and not being this competitiveness that sometimes happens is very important for us to continue to lift each other up. And I know I say women, but there are a lot of, I have had a lot of mentors that are male.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. We all have to do it together. It like you said, it's all about togetherness.
I think what you just said, mentoring is huge. I mean, I think as women in leadership roles, we really have a responsibility to reach out to other younger women or women that are in, roles that are different than ours. Just to reach out and say, I've been there. I've been through the struggles. I can, help you with that. Whether or not someone takes you up on that or not, that kind of ties back to my original story, right? So someone said to me, can I help you? I think you need help. And I might have said, in certain defiant stages of my life, no, but then I would have said, yeah. So I think we still need to just, when we see somebody that, we think we can guide or help in a nice, helpful way, we reach out to people. I just think we are afraid to do that a lot,
Right. Yeah. And then others are afraid to accept the help. So because of that whole weakness piece. So so it is really about letting go of being so worried. I say this all the time, judgment and vulnerability, two of the things that I talk a lot about, because if we are less judgmental, people could be more vulnerable, and then we can help them to nurture them to grow and thrive. So those are the things.
100%. Well said. Yes.
Yeah, and asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim. I agree with that 100%. Tim, I had a question. You have straddled both the for-profit and the nonprofit sector. So when you switched from for-profit to, I'm going to say for impact instead of nonprofit, what was like that first moment? Did you have like an epiphany moment, or was there something that came to you as like, I did not realize XYZ now that I'm working for a for impact organization?
Well, I think the biggest difference for me was one of my roles at New Jersey Press Inc. as the corporate communications director was running the foundation, serving as a volunteer on board, and giving out money. Now, all of a sudden, I had to raise money. But I think it's because of my volunteer background that I could easily transition into that role. And I had a great appreciation for the people that worked in the for impact world. Because I got to know them in my role of serving on the various boards throughout Monmouth County. And how I wound up at Brookdale, just as an aside, I used to be on the foundation board of trustees when I worked at New Jersey Press Inc., representing the company. And when they were looking to fill that position and elevate the position, the then current president, who I knew of the foundation board, reached out to me and asked if I was willing to have a conversation. That conversation wound up me being there for 20 years.
You just never know. Right place, right time, right connections.
Right. Exactly. And this is one thing I always say. I always said to my daughter too, if you can write well and speak well and just show up, right? Show up.
That's right.
Absolutely. So it's funny you say that, because that's something my dad used to say all the time. Life's about conversations, a hug, and showing up. Those were the three things he would always
say.
Wish I had met your dad. Sounds like a great guy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I wish you met him too. So I have one last question for both of you. I ask this of every single guest that I have, and I'm excited because the goal is to put those answers in a book one day. So
Nice.
so I'm really excited because everybody gets asked the same question in 2021. So Alice, if you knew then what you know now, what would that be?
It would be what I said a few minutes ago. It would be to think about a long-term vision for your life. And, it doesn't have to be rigid or, like it can't be changed. And then say no to everything that doesn't get you there, then and my mother used to say, 5 minutes of feeling, good isn't worth, years of not getting where you want to. So I would avoid stuff that was kind of in the moment, immediate gratification to kind of, get to that North Star ultimately.
I'm going to be thinking a lot about that North Star, by the way, because I never really think about it like that. And that's what I love about these podcasts too, is that like I take away something from each one. And you've said North Star so much that I'm really going to be paying attention to that now, by the way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Tim, what would be your answer to the same question?
Your vibe attracts your tribe. What do I mean by that? I only surround myself with positive people. I don't believe in drama. I don't focus on problems. I focus on solutions. But that was a learning process for me. And so if I knew that then, I could have avoided some things. But I believe that's all part of our journey. That's what makes us who we are.
Oh, without a doubt. And I love that saying, your vibe. What is it?
I love that.
Your vibe attracts your tribe.
Attracts your tribe. I love that saying. And so that is a good one. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's those people you surround yourself with.
Right.
They represent you, a parts of you, who you are. And you don't always realize that. And sometimes now, like, I hope people will start thinking about, ooh, who am I surrounding myself with? Because when you have the great energy, right, you could be buzzing in a room when you have
Absolutely.
that.
And what is your answer to that? Are we allowed to know?
Yes, that's a great, wow. It's never been turned on me before, Alex. There's a lot, but I think the one thing that I would say is don't allow fear to control who you are. Really, when you believe in and in your heart that you want to do something and get somewhere, and that it's feasible, but fear stops you in your tracks because you're afraid of judgment, you're afraid you'll fail. That has happened to me in my life where I didn't push forward. This podcast was supposed to happen 5 years ago. So, because I didn't think anybody'd listen, I didn't think anybody would come on. And, there's so many of those other things that I did later on because I finally got the courage to make it. So, that would be my answer. So thank you.
Great.
To turn your tables on me. This is awesome.
That's what I do.
Is there anything else that you want to share that you would like the listeners to know about yourselves or Oceans Harbor House as we end the episode for today?
I guess what I would say is that, we're always trying to figure out ways to keep the organization thriving, but also so that we can provide services for generations to come. So any support that someone would be giving us it's like the Save Today to Empower Tomorrow. It's not just about this moment. It's about kids for generations to come. So that's what we're trying to do, is build things that can last, for years to come.
Yeah, and it's not just about providing shelter, food, program services, and hope for kids right now. It's making an impact, as Alice said, for generations to come, for the common good, so they can be productive citizens in the community, giving back. And raising healthy families, working good jobs. So it's not just about in the moment, it's about where we're going in the future as well.
That's wonderful. And I want to thank both of you for being change makers.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure talking to you.
You're a change maker, Jody.
Thank you.
Indeed.
I really appreciate that. Now, Tim, one last time, oceansharborhouse.org, right? That's where everybody can find you?
Correct.
Awesome. Alice, Tim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jody.
Yes. Oh, you're welcome. I hope you'll come back. We'd love updates. Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. And so I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. My mantra, today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small steps or large steps are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goals? Thank you so much for listening or watching on the YouTube channel. Have a great day, everyone.